Okay, so hi year fours. Last week, what we did was we created our game, which allowed us to start the game. My score was set to 0. If I run through the code, we should be able to explain exactly what I'm doing. Score was set to 0, and then my sprite, in my case, which was my parrot, was continuously hiding, waiting a second, going to a random position, then showing, and then waiting a second before he hid again. Whilst that was going on, if I click on my parrot as well, I was getting my score was going up by 1, and then my character was hiding again for him to then show again following that first loop of instructions. Now, most of you guys have created that really well, so well done to everyone there. Now, some of you guys have asked me further questions. Some of you have said to me, sir, how can I add a timer to my game? So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be adding a timer to our game. Now, we need to think about this. If we add a timer to this, exactly what are we going to be adding? We need to think about exactly how we're going to code this. Can any of you guys tell me exactly where this will be on this, in which section or which category it will be in? Would it be in motion? Is something changing? Is something changing the way it looks? Am I doing something with the way it sounds? The one that I'm actually going to head to again, remember, it's something that's going to change. So if we talk about a variable, if I have a bucket, imagine inside that bucket, I could constantly change things. I could put something into that. I can take it out again. It may hold a value. For example, I may, in the game currently, we've got the score. Whenever my game starts, I empty my bucket out. I've got an empty bucket. Every time you click on that parrot, I add 1 to that bucket, and at the end of the game, I see how many times we've clicked on. What's the score in my bucket? It's actually 17 because that's how many times I added 1 to it. Variable. Is what we're going to be using for our timer. Remember, in this time where we had our score starting at 0, our timer could start at 30, could start at 10, and constantly we're going to take 1 out of this bucket. And when that bucket is empty, when it's 0, then the game is finished, kaput. So I'm going to head over to variables. And I'm going to create a new variable. Now, before I do that, we need to think about exactly where am I going to code this. At the moment, I only have my sprite, but is it my sprite which I'm actually coding? Do I want to assign this variable to my sprite? I can do, it's not a problem. But I need to think if I end up duplicating that sprite, I may have an issue where I could duplicate the code, which could cause an issue, which we're not going to go into right now. We're going to simply create that timer on my backdrop. So I'm going to head over to backdrop. I've got my variable blocks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable, and this variable I need to think of a sensible name. If it's to do with my timer, the time that they have left, can anyone give me any sensible names? Timer could be a good one, or time left could be another good one. So I'm going to call this timer. Okay, so I've created my timer there. Now I need to think about coding my timer. Okay, so let's head back over to the code. We need an event to start this off. Again, if you guys remember, I have a few that I can use. When a certain key is pressed, when my green flag is pressed, or when my stage is clicked. What's going to actually trigger my timer variable to do something? It will actually be when my green flag is clicked. So I can get rid of the other two. When my green flag is clicked, exactly what do I want to happen? I actually want my variable to set to a certain value. So I'm going to drag in, set my variable to 0, and I'm going to change my variable to the timer. And what I'm going to do is my timer, I'm going to actually set it to 10. Obviously, 10 seconds is not a good amount of time for a game. The Only reason why I'm setting this to 10 for now is so that I can test it out, see if it works, and once it works, I can change that. And therefore, I only need to wait 10 seconds. In fact, to save me another 6 seconds, I'm going to change it to 4. Okay, just for the sake of testing it out and make sure that it works well. So once my green flag is clicked, my timer is set to 4. What do I want to happen next? I obviously will want my timer to go down by 1. So I can go to change my variable by 1. Should we test that out? Let's see what happens. When I click on my green flag, my timer should set to 4 and it will change my variable by 1. Okay, so it's set to 4. That worked, but it didn't change my variable by 1. Why not? What was the issue there? For some of you guys who did identify that, it was actually I have not changed my variable in that. So I'm going to click on that drop-down menu. I'm going to head over to timer. And now I've got changed my timer by 1. Let's test that out again. Green flag. There we go. That's changed to 5. That worked. But I didn't want it to go up. I wanted it to go down. So what can I change? And what can I change it to in order to make my score go down? Or sorry, my timer to go down. I will actually change it to -1. Okay, so now again, obviously we always want to test our coding out, make sure it works. If it doesn't work, we can go back and amend that. There we go. That's gone down to 3. Perfect. However, I obviously want it to constantly go down to 3. So what should I use? I can duplicate that. I can make that code come, 3 times or 4 times, should I say? Let's do that just 4 times. And then let's see what happens. So I click on my green flag. There we go. It went down to 0. There was a problem there. So I need to add the control there, which was the wait 1 second. Now I can add that every time. That's not a problem. But now imagine when I want to change this to a minute long, to 2 minutes long, to 5 minutes long. Imagine how long that's going to take me to code. Imagine how many lines of code I'm going to have. So that is not the best way to do this. So I'm going to get rid of all of these. And what we have is I've actually told it to constantly repeat this. So I could use, obviously, if I've got 4 seconds there, if I head back to my control, I could use the repeat and ask it to repeat 4 times. Okay, and I will say change timer by -1 and then wait a second. Repeat that 4 times. Let's see how that goes. Okay, and as you can see, it started off at 4 and it waited a second, came back to 1. Now, I can, if I decide to make that 10 seconds, I could change the timer to 10 and repeat to 10. If I change it to 60 seconds, I can change those two to 60. But is that the best way I do this? It's not. I'm actually going to go over and use the repeat until. Now, what am I going to wait until? What's going to cause this timer to stop? That's right. It is when the timer gets to 0. So I'm going to head over to operators. Now, the operators category, that has all sorts of mathematical blocks of code. So I've got, I can add things together. And obviously I've got addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. I can get it to pick a random number. I can use the greater than, less than, equals to symbols. I can use and, or, and not. They're sort of Boolean blocks of code. I can join things together. So I could join two bits of code, 2 strings they're called, 2 bits of text. I could take the first letter of a word. I could take the length of a word. I can check if a certain word contains a letter. I can use the mod and round functions. We can worry about what they are later on at some point. In this case, what I will be doing, some of you guys may have guessed that I will be using the equals. Okay, so I'll very quickly get rid of all the other ones which I do not want. So I'm going to repeat those lines of code until something equals something else. And we already mentioned it. It was until my timer equals 0. So I'm going to head over to variables. I'm going to take this block of code here, timer. I'm going to pop that in my circle there. Repeat until timer equals 0. And I will simply take that block of code, pop that in there. Okay, and there we go. So now whatever I change my number here to, whatever I change the length of my game to, that should run until my timer gets to 0. Okay, so that works. Now there was an issue there, if anyone realized it. Okay, my timer should have started off at 4. It went straight to 3, so my user or my player is actually missing out on 1 second worth of game time. Can anyone tell me what the issue is, why that's done that, and what can I do to change that? As soon as the game starts, it sets the timer to 4, and straight away it sets the timer to -1. It changes the timer by -1. What I need to do is I need to bring that wait 1 block up like so. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll let you guys code that. So I've got when my green flag is clicked, I head down to my variables. I created a variable. I called it the timer. I wanted to set timer to a certain number to start my game. I want to use a repeat until from the control. I want to head over to the operators, grab the equals block of code. And from my variables, I grab the timer, make sure it's equal to 0, wait a second, and I change my timer by 1. So go ahead, if you guys can code that, come back and, we need to test it out. If it doesn't work, try to take a look and see what's wrong with it. Come back and you can continue. For some reason, my project didn't save, so I will do that again. Okay, so we've got that done. I've got my score. I've got my timer. Let's see how well I can do. Okay, so I've got a decent score there of 3. My parrot's still coming back. So my timer's finished. So what should I do? What I could do is I could simply head over to control and I can use the stop all. Okay, so stop all, and that would stop the whole game. I could add exits end screen. We can worry about that later on, but at that point I will end all. Let me test that out again. Does that work entirely? There we go. So let's try it if I do not click on my parrot. Okay, so he's hidden as well. Now, there could be the possibility for the parrot to come up, or to stay on the screen and give the player an extra opportunity to get another point, which we can obviously then code it so that once it gets to 0, then that he hides as well. But we can worry about that later on. Now, what I can also do is I can actually use something called a broadcast. So if I head over back to my backdrop, once my timer heads down to 0, what I can do is broadcast a message. Now, what this broadcast message does is, imagine what it will do is it will shout out a message. For example, it will shout out stop, or let's change this. New message, let's write end game. End game. Okay, and I'm going to put that right in there. So once my green flag is clicked on my backdrop, my timer is set to 4. Constantly until my timer gets to 0, it will reduce by 1 every second. Once it gets to 0, it's going to broadcast a message. It's going to shout out end game, and then it will stop everything. I'm going to head over to my parrot, and I'm going to add a new um, a new sort of event, and this is when I receive endgame. So imagine the game, the stage will shout out endgame. We're not going to see it. We're not going to hear it. But once that parrot receives that endgame, it will then hide. So I'll head over to looks, hide. So it will hide straight away, no matter what's going on. If I want to add another stop, all I can do. Okay, so now I'm happy with that code. Now, what I want to do is I want to make my game a little bit harder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recreate my parrot, and I'm going to create it so that it's an evil parrot. Okay, so if anyone clicks on the evil parrot, what would happen is it would actually reduce the score instead. So I'm going to right click on my parrot here. If you guys are using a touchpad, so something such as on a Chromebook or a MacBook, for example, you can use two fingers like this, click down on your touchpad, and it should double click for you. If you're using an iPad, you can hold your finger on it and it should bring down the drop down menu as well. So I'm going to duplicate that. Now I've got two parrots. So let's see what would happen now. As soon as my game is started, I have two parrots just appearing in random places. My second parrot, however, I'm going to head in and edit that. Let's change the costume. Let's give him, let's fill his eyes red. Let's make his beak. Let's fill his beak and make it black. Okay, and yeah, that should be enough so we can tell a difference. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm also going to head over to code, and I'm going to change the score by -1 anytime he's clicked. Whoops, not -11, whoops. -1 every time he's clicked. So let's test out this game now. There we go, -1. Okay, so that's all done. Now, what you guys can do is once you've coded that, you can play around with the game a little bit more, test it out, let your parents test it out, let your siblings test it out, ask them for more ideas. And what you can do is you can incorporate these ideas into your game. What ideas can you have? Obviously, we're going to extend the time. Possibly, you may edit it so that when you have a third parrot, possibly a smaller bird, as soon as that bird is clicked, maybe you get bonus points. Maybe you get extra time. Maybe you lose some time. You could possibly have a different level where the characters flash at different speeds. You could have a different background. There's so many things you could do with this. There's so many things you could do. It's endless what you could do with this. So give it a go. Code what you wish. Get some ideas. Ask your parents, ask your siblings, ask your friends to play. Ask them for ideas and try to incorporate them into the game. Feel free to share or ask me how you can incorporate any of these ideas into your game as well. What I may do is I might add additional lessons to this that you can do outside of class in order to incorporate them into the game. I will also be adding another lesson, which will be an extra on how you can add a high score. High score is something very straightforward, but if you can incorporate it, or if you can learn how to incorporate a high score, that would be great. You can use it all the time whenever you're creating all of your games. Next week, we're going to be going on to another project. So it's another project in Scratch, which will be a bit more of an animation project. And we're going to spend a couple of weeks on that as well. So I hope you enjoyed that. Feel free to let everyone else play with that. And let me know what your parents and your siblings think of the game too. Thank you very much.